I do wear a couple of hats, and of course the hat that I'm most proud of is my hat as a parent. And so before I get into talking about critical decision points, I wanted to talk a little bit about why I do what I do and kind of talk to you from a family perspective. So I have a very large family. I know, yep, it's, even I marvel sometimes, and it was not the plan. So I have 7 children. Zoe is my oldest child, and she is 26 now, so this photo is about 13 years old. I framed this photo because this is what I like to think what my family actually is. You know, it's like an Instagram photo. But what it actually is like people running around in this half naked with diapers and food and all sorts. So it was just like this one beautiful snapshot in time. This was on Mother's Day. And so Zoe is my oldest, she's 26. And then my second oldest is Delaney, and she's the one in the middle, the blonde. And then we had Berkeley third, and we had the good fortune of adopting Camden. He's our son, and he also has Down syndrome like my oldest daughter, Zoe. And we were able to adopt him and bring him home when he was about 3 months old. So we've had him from the time, yes, he was very young. And then, so Camden and Berkeley are 5 months apart. So I did this whole twin thing, I guess, in preparation for the actual twin thing that would happen 3 years later. So we already had 2 cribs, 2 strollers, 2 car seats. And I was like, well, we'll just get all back out again. And I do believe I screamed in that doctor appointment. And then, of course, the last one is Sarah Marie. And so if you can imagine, Sarah's now about to turn 14, and this snapshot looks a little different. But I put this picture in, one, because I love this picture and I have it framed, but 2, because I'm going to be speaking to you from someone that critical decision points really has an impact for me and for my children. Zoe and Cam now are about to move out of the educational system. Zoe has since graduated, and Camden graduates this year. But there are so many things in this guide that I'm going to talk about that I wish I had known about earlier, and how I think it's going to really help the families that we work with, and if you're a parent yourself. This picture is a little newer. This is last year at Easter.
The bow ties.
And yeah, aren't the bow ties awesome? Yeah, we're a bow tie family. So this is at church. My daughter Delaney has since married, and she now lives in Florida, and my daughter Berkeley is serving a mission for our church, and she's living in Brazil. So these are the 5 that we have at home. And the reason I chose this picture is that even as our children age with disabilities, there are still major decisions that we're making, and there's still critical decision points along the way. And so Cam, as you can see, is like, he loves his brothers very much. He just slid right into the family, and he's been awesome. This is my Zoe. She's my oldest, and she's the reason I started on all of this. She was a surprise to us, but what a gift, and she's a gift to everybody. And I look at this picture, and this guide that's going to be coming out that I'm speaking about today, because she was my first child with a disability, there are things that I wished I could have done a little differently, only because I didn't know better. And I'm hoping that this guide will really give parents and families the tools that they need to make those really critical decisions. And we were talking about this early in the activity, that if we're able to do some of that work on the front end, it's going to make a big difference on the back end if we can take care of it initially. So that's my Zoe, and she's a joy. She's a rock star in Bristol, so everywhere we go, nobody knows who I am. Everybody knows who Zoe is. I consistently have to say, and I mean they enjoy talking to her, interacting with her. Camden has a job at the Burger Bar, if you've ever been to the Burger Bar, and he works there on Fridays. And so, gosh, all my kids, you know, what a gift. Anyway, this is what we're actually going to be discussing today, and this is critical decision points for families of children with disabilities. And you should have, there is a great flyer that TTAC made. It's a little, it's made out on cardstock. Yes, Mac is holding it up right there. And we're going to talk about the necessity of this and why that this guide even came about. So a little bit of the background. In 2014, the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities recognized that there were challenges in the state of Virginia, that a lot of parents weren't recognizing when they needed to make critical decisions for their children's future. And there was confusion in families. And honestly, there was confusion in my own family. As much as I read and try and learn about all those things that I need to do for my kids, I was still sometimes coming in on the back end of certain decisions and not recognizing that I didn't know what I needed to know for my children. So they recognized that there was a need for something. So in 2016, the Virginia Board for People with Disabilities, they provided a grant to the VDOE, and the Department of Education came up with a guide, and that's the guide that I'm going to be speaking about. Now, this guide is still in draft form, but it's going to publication because there's going to be trainings on these critical decision points across the state. And I'm going to give you, well, at the end of this, I'll show you the dates and the locations for Region 6 and Region 7. Because we really want to get as many families, and this training is for families. This is not a professional training. They're going to do train the trainer trainings for them. But this is a training specifically for families so that they can recognize when they're supposed to be making those super important decisions for their children. The guide is divided into 3 sections. So you have terms and acronyms, and this is pretty comprehensive. It goes over all those different, all those acronyms that we need to learn as parents and professionals. And there are some that even still I don't know that I'll hear and I'll say, oh my gosh, here's another one I don't know. And it seems like they're coming up with new ones. We're not going to really talk about that today. We're going to talk about these 2 things, keys to academic success. There's 9 keys, and then we're going to talk about critical decision points. And the critical decision points are more or less set up with, or in the way that you would look at, this is a decision that I need to be making, and when should I be making this decision? And Tracy Lee, the one who has really spearheaded this whole initiative, and she's the one that's, with the help of many, put this guide together. She'll also be the one doing the trainings. She's going to go in depth about every one of these things in the training. She's going to discuss the keys. She's going to discuss the critical decision points. I'm sort of the intro act to what Tracy is going to be doing, and just kind of explaining and hoping to, build some excitement about this guide, because it's really going to help a lot of families, and I think it's going to explain a lot of stuff. Key number 1, supporting continual learning and development. Of course, we realize and recognize how much the early childhood years, how important they are, and how critical it is for children to learn as much as they possibly can when they were young, to just put them in a really rich learning environment, which we tried to do with all of our children, and really specifically Zoe and Camden, so that they could learn as much as they could. And honestly, when I was going over this draft, certainly some of the critical decision points are specifically for children with disabilities, but a lot of these are great for all children, for all typical children. So really excited about this. And so this first one is supporting continual learning and development. The second key is regular attendance, and it just seems that more and more we're realizing the importance of attendance and how much we need to focus on that. And if we don't get them to school, then we can't help them learn. And I know that sometimes there's barriers with children with disabilities, especially those that have medical issues, but attendance is something that they're really going to discuss, and this initiative of really, I know in my school system, the Bristol, Virginia school system, David's doing a lot of great things with attendance right now, and so schools are really understanding the importance of getting our children into the school. Number 3, being engaged in my child's education. We all know family engagement. Tracy Lee, who put the guide together, is with the family engagement. She's a family engagement specialist. And being engaged in your child's education, I don't think I really need to say a whole lot about it. Statistically, it's been proven over and over, best practice, that if you're engaged in your child's education, the outcomes are going to be significantly better than if you're not. And so a lot of initiatives in the state right now in helping families to really be engaged in what their children are learning, and getting into the classrooms and volunteering and making sure they're getting homework done and getting to school. Key number 4, understanding our rights. And I'm not really going to go too much into this, but understanding our parental rights. And I'm talking specifically now as a parent of a child with 2 children who have intellectual disabilities, what those parental rights are and how we're able to use them collaboratively with the school. Sometimes it's necessary to really know what your rights are as a parent, and it's important to know parental rights if you're a professional as well and you're assisting families. And so she'll go into that more when she does the training. Key number 5, promoting my child's independence and self-determination. So I have a great story about this with Camden. When Camden got his job at the Burger Bar, right, so he's super excited about this. And the family was excited. We have all kinds of pictures of him in his Burger Bar t-shirt. And one of the things that I don't know that I always realize, the importance of self-determination and giving Camden and Zoe that voice to be the people that they want to be. I'm so busy, I feel like managing them sometimes for whatever reason that I don't allow them to tell me what it is they want and what they want to pursue. And so Camden, he got this job, and so they pay him in cash every Friday. And every Friday, he likes to run across the street. We have a gas station across the street from our house. And he likes to go across the street and get himself a little bag of chips and a little soda. And just this sort of really cool thing that happened when he started making his own money. And then he asked me if he could cross the street. And I'm like, I don't know, you've never crossed the street. And I said, I'll let you go if I watch. And then, so I watched him, he was fine. And now he's using money, which he never did before. And all these things that I didn't think about. I think sometimes we can open these doors for our children and not even realize that we're doing it. And so by him getting this job, I think sometimes I'm so busy telling Cam or helping him that I don't listen to him as much. And the importance of promoting independence and letting him be Camden Richard and whatever that means to him and whatever's meaningful to him. And self-determination, being able to speak up and be an advocate for himself. And I did this much better with Camden than I did with Zoe because I didn't really know about it. I didn't even think about it. It wasn't even like on my radar that I needed to really sort of foster the this self-independence in my children. Keeping long-term goals in mind early in a child's educational career. So, and again, I'm speaking as a parent, I feel like with my children that went through general education in a typical way, I think that when you enter them into school, anything's possible, and you're just excited to see what they're going to learn and what they're going to do. And again, for Zoe and Camden, I was always sort of looking at the here and now, what's happening right now, what's happening tomorrow, how do we fix right now? And I'm not saying that's not important, but we also need to be focused long-term and keeping those long-term goals in mind. What type of diploma are we hoping our children are going to get? And then based on that type of diploma, what kind of career do we want them to have, or jobs do we want them to pursue, or what type of jobs, I should say, do they want to pursue? And so keeping these long-term goals in mind early, and this is really a lot of what Critical Decision Points is about recognizing at an early age that you're going to make decisions that will affect the children, your families in the long term. Understanding assessment options and their relationship to diplomas. Our children are covered by IDIA until they're 22, and this decision that you have to make about what diploma to pursue and how you want your child to be tested. And so this is, of course, a very, very important one and sort of the basis for Critical Decision Points, because I work with a lot of families that don't realize that when they make certain decisions about the testing for their children, that those decisions are going to affect the type of diploma that they're going to get. And so, again, sort of being focused on the here and now and what's working, but sort of forgetting to look into the long term. And honestly, it's because, when I was doing this with Zoe, I was not even aware that the decisions I was making for her in elementary school and middle school would affect us, far into the future. Understanding diploma options, and this is key number 8, and really recognizing the diplomas have changed in the past few years in the state of Virginia, and recognizing what those diploma options are, and your child self-determining what they actually want to do and go for, and working together as a team in the IEP to really understand what is the best option for your child with a disability. And this last one is, again, a big one, and as a parent, I didn't completely understand, and the difference between modification and accommodations, and modifying the curriculum and just making accommodations so you can access the general curriculum. It's a big difference between the two, and I think a lot of parents like myself are not completely clear on the difference in these two things. And so this is a really important term. I mean, you think of two words, and you know, the difference between the two is really kind of far apart. And so modifying the content of what you're learning. For Zoe, we had to do modifications, and so that she could really be a part of the general ed classroom. We're going to get into the critical decision points now. Point number one, will the IEP or a 504 plan be more appropriate for my child? Really significant question, and causes a lot of confusion sometimes with families that I work with. And so if you can kind of see how this is set up, and if you look at your flyer as well, it asks the question, and then it gives this great sort of when to consider, and the answer is at your child's initial eligibility. And again, this guide is very comprehensive, and it'll give a lot more information. I'm just kind of letting you know what's in this. But you're going to see these are really great questions, and a lot that I would have loved to have been able to kind of ask and have answered when I needed them. A lot of them I wasn't even thinking about at the time. Will my preschool age child receive an IEP or an ISP? When to consider when making decisions regarding your child's daycare preschool placement. I mean, if you think about, if you're a parent here, or if you think about the families that you work with, certainly you'll recognize the importance of these questions. What diploma option will help our child move toward his post-secondary goals? When to consider. And I think this is a surprise to a lot of people. Elementary school is not too early. The I'm Determined program goes as early as elementary school, doesn't it? And we can really start looking at a very young age at diploma options and what the long-term plan is for your child with a disability. So when to consider elementary school is not too early. I think that's great, and it's an important point. Point number 4, where will my child's IEP be implemented? Where will services be provided? When to consider at the first IEP meeting and each meeting after that point. And again, another great question that I don't know that parents, and again, speaking for myself, that I always completely understood placement and what that meant in the short term and what it meant in the long term. Point number 5, I disagree with the eligibility team, IEP team decision. How should I proceed? When to consider immediately. So that one's, again, another really important question. And there are certainly times, I've working with some families recently that are not happy with the decisions about eligibility. Point number 6, what options should we begin discussing and implementing with respect to pre-employment transition services and other transition planning? When to consider when your child reaches 14. Again, this is something I'm sure I could have done a lot better as a parent, and I've certainly learned on the back end. We just starting, I think, when Camden was a sophomore or a junior, really inviting him into his own IEP meetings. And I knew that he could be there. I guess I just didn't really recognize the importance of him being in his own IEP meeting. And you know what else, guys? How quickly it all goes by, right? Because when you're doing this, you're thinking you have all this time to make these decisions, and yet it goes really fast. And I have Camden graduating this year, and certainly in looking back, I would have done things a little bit different. And transition can be a super difficult time for families that have children with disabilities. It's still a difficult time for us trying to figure out what we want now moving forward for Zoe and Camden. Camden's a little more able to verbalize what he wants and what he'd like to do. And so this working with respect to pre-employment, you know, really digging into what their interests are, what their skill set is, what they're good at is a really important thing to do. But for the purpose of this point 6, when your child reaches 14, really no later than that should you be looking at transition and those services. And this is the last point, how we will discuss disability with our child, including the transfer of rights at age 18. When to consider as soon as your child is found eligible for special education. And again, this as a parent was something that I remember going to an I'm Determined presentation done by Mac, and really thinking about the fact that I had never really talked to Zoe and Camden about their disability, that I'd never really discussed it with them, which was such a disservice to them. And so I held individual conversations with them. I don't know necessarily the impact that it had on Zoe, but for Camden, it was significant. It helped Camden understand why people didn't understand him speaking all the time, why he wasn't driving like his brothers were, why he wasn't doing some of the things that he wanted to do. I guess I'd never really thought, I don't know what I thought, but I had never really sat down with him before and said, you know, you have a disability. It's called Down syndrome. It's an intellectual disability, and these are some of the challenges that you might have, and let's discuss that. And it was one of the best conversations we ever had. Would have never thought to do it as a parent. I mean, he never asked, and so I just never really thought about it. And of course, transfer of rights, that's a big, big decision about guardianship and the different options that are available to families and parents. This last slide is how will the information be shared. It's going to be in a printed guide. Tracy told me it's 32 pages. And but it's, so for me, right, I am visual, and I don't like pages with just like lots of dark print, and she says they've color coded it and they've made it easier for someone like myself to read. Yeah, things will jump out at you. And so this printed guide is going to be printed by the DOE, and then there's going to be web-based training modules, and then there's going to be 8 in-person parent training in 8 regions across the state. So if you all would write this down, or it's also on the back of your little flyer that you have.